points up and down the US West Coast. She's the president of AIGA, the Center for Brand Experience. She is also the founder, owner, and CEO of Goto Media, and her clients include the likes of Adobe, Apple, Warner Brothers. She calls herself a design ethnographer. I'll let her unpack all of that for you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kelly Goto.
Good afternoon. Yes, the term design ethnographer. One of the more interesting things, actually before lunch, Tyler introduced me and said, Kelly Goto, interesting girl. And usually people say that after a date, they're not quite sure how it went. It was interesting. You know, people use that term when they're not quite sure how to describe someone. I've spent a long time trying to make my parents understand what I do for a living. I'm a fourth generation Japanese, which means yonsei, fourth generation American, actually. And the only thing I can say in Japanese is Nihongo wa karimasen, which means I don't understand Japanese. So what's been interesting for me is trying to get my parents' lowest common denominator of thinking, to understand what I do. And at one point, I was actually lecturing to a group, maybe about 3 times the size of this, and my parents wanted to come. It was in Seattle, and they said, can we come hear you talk so we understand what you do? And I said, just as long as I can't see you, it's fine, And so right as I'm beginning my session, the back doors open wide, and in come my mom, my dad, and my dentist. And that was it. But I went on like a trooper, and in the end, they sort of had a clue. So design ethnography, and why am I choosing to focus on lifestyle design? Well, I realized in being here that lifestyle design is a term that is so used by all of you in this industry, fashion and architecture and product design and getting into product UI and innovation and furniture design. It's all about lifestyle. Well, I'm hailing from a technical background. I'm coming from a world of computers and screens and interfaces, and we haven't until recently really considered the term lifestyle to be a part of what we do and what we think. And if there's one thing I'd like to have you take away with you at the end of this session, it's to understand how you can embrace these notions of lifestyle-oriented design and thinking into your workplaces, into your corporate cultures, into the thinking not only from the top management, but easing on down into the people that are actually designing and putting together the products and interfaces that we use today. So I want to start off by thinking Volvo's a sponsor, and I think about the way that we interface with the things that we use on a regular basis. So how many of you have had the check engine light of your car turn on at one point or the other? Anybody? When it turns on, how many of you rush immediately to your dealer and say, oh my God, I have an emergency, I have to listen to my car? Not really. Usually you tap it a few times, it goes away. You take a look at it, you let it run, you even call and say, is this an emergency? And they say, well, wait a few weeks and see if it goes away. So this check engine light really doesn't have all that much validity, right? So we think about our car, what is it trying to tell us? So I start thinking back, and a friend of mine, Tara LeMay, really got me thinking about different ways that we communicate, and this is about sharing information and thinking about, okay, we have different levels of communication, we've mastered some of them. Human-to-human communication. Even across culture, we know that a smile means you're friendly. We know that, if you look upset, you can kind of read that across the board. So we've kind of mastered this human-to-human communication. We start getting into machine-to-machine communication, looking at XML and code and binary and all the zeros and ones, and that's going pretty smoothly, don't you think? All the zeros and ones flying around, and we even think about the way that we interact with machines, and we've started to familiarize ourselves with our products and our interfaces that we use on a regular basis, and we've been kind of getting that down. Some things have been a little more confusing, like the universal remote control, which I tried and I failed miserably. But generally, we have an understanding of it. The area that we haven't really mastered yet, and it's really pointing to the future, is the machine-to-human communication. And that's really where we're at today and what we're trying to master and what we think about as our future. Hannah made a great comment about solid versus liquid versus sky, and in that single statement, she described why I can't sleep at night and why I work on the weekends. Because I myself and constantly thinking about what's happening now, what's going on with my company, what is my team working on. At the same time, What's 2 years out? What do we need to be thinking about down the road? How can we start planning for that? And then at the same time, what is in the future? What do we have to plan for in the next 5 to 10 years, and how can we set ourselves up best to get to that moment? So that moment is now. We started to think about the differences, and I will talk a little bit about Web 2.0 and even think about what Web 3.0 means, but it's really about communication between machines and humans and how we get there through this concept of sharing information and communicating cross platforms. So the Turing test is something that came out in the 1950s, and Alan Turing, he had this concept, and it was great because it was started at a party, a lot of drinks going on, and there was this contest he decided that they would have where you would have someone in a room, and that person would have to decide if they were talking to a machine or if they were talking to a human. Have you heard about this test? So this was way back in the 1950s. They were starting to say, ooh, AI is out there and computers can think. And I can prove to you that I can create a program that will respond in very human-like terms so that you can't tell the difference between one versus the other. So this is ELIZA. And ELIZA is available on the web. And you basically can type in a question, ELIZA will answer. And pretty soon, especially with the responses over and over again, and sometimes you can get into a very interesting dialogue with this computer, you realize it's not really real. And if you've used live chat, sometimes you have a real person, sometimes you have automated responses. And more we're trying to get this concept of what's going on in the computer world back into our brain and have it feel like it's real. So it's kind of an interesting experiment, and I think we're finally getting to this, and 50 years later, trying to get to the point where computers are talking to humans and it's making sense. So why lifestyle? Well, I kind of started off by understanding, what is it that I'm trying to do and where are we trying to get to? And I had a lot of notions of interface design and getting into the way people think and getting into their desires. And a lot of what Hannah talked about and also a lot of what Malcolm talked about is really true. We've moved from something that is necessity into desire, a culture of desire. And that's really where lifestyle comes in, because you need to be able to integrate products and services into your daily lives, the daily lives of your customers. Now, if any of you have attended some of the workshops in the afternoon, I really encourage you to, especially tomorrow with a continuum and the smart design, because a lot of the philosophies that they have and the way that they're going to present their material is a lot of the thinking that we've also been doing at Goto Media. And it's really great to see that globally we're all becoming aligned in the way that we know we need to reach out to our customers in a whole new way. So lifestyle and innovation. What are companies that reflect this on a global level? Well, starting off with the brands that I use on a regular basis. I'm an Apple fan, of course. Love them, love everything that they're doing. You tend to have an emotional relationship with these products. You say, I love that. JetBlue is a local airlines. Tyler talked about some of his favorite airlines. Well, mine is JetBlue, where you walk up to a kiosk and it says, howdy. And it's very friendly. And you call up customer service and you say, you know what, I need to change my flight. And they say, okay, well, that's going to cost, it's a change fee. And I say, yeah, no problem. And so they process it. And then she says, oh, you know what, your new ticket's actually less. So you're going to get a refund of $35. And I think, wow, that's great customer service. And so JetBlue has really mastered the entire experience, not just of the website, which they've changed into a more 2.0 Ajax-style environment, and even in the last month. But it's migrated over to kiosks, to the way that you interact with your customer service, to the airline personnel, to the seats that you sit in, the fact that you aren't allowed to bring, they don't serve you dinners, and so you bring your own brown bag lunch, and pretty soon everyone's sharing food on the plane and talking. And it's really a fun and friendly atmosphere, and they've really mastered the entire customer experience and integrated something of their brand that fits into at least my lifestyle and a lot of people who use them. TiVo is another great tool and a product that's been around for years and years, and every time I ask someone if they've used TiVo, they love it. They raise their hand, they say, I love it, and so many people haven't. Have you guys used TiVo, anybody? So TiVo's not really that prevalent here, but it's a fantastic interface, very friendly, intuitive, and now it starts to think about the shows that you like to watch and automatically record them for you. It's becoming something of a personal assistant in a way where you can watch the TV that you want to watch when you want to watch it. Gmaps and Google, this is more of a practical company out of necessity, but yet people really love it because Google has mastered the art of simplicity. Hannah talked about getting to that point of simplicity and striving for smart design and getting to that human factor at the end. And Google has done so much of that and more. I'm lucky, or I'm not sure if it's super lucky, to live in San Francisco for the last 8 years, actually almost 9 years now. And I watched the bubble come and collapse. And what's happened, and it's been so interesting to see our economy from 2001 grow back into what's practical and what's necessary, and also what's desirable and what people are craving. So we've got these two sides that we really start thinking about. Obviously, iPod is one of the biggest success stories, in the world, and the way people are integrating this with their lives. But I also want you to start thinking about devices relating back to another interface, which is your desktop computer. Because we're not just creating one thing, we're actually creating an experience of communication and sharing of information across channels. Social networks have been mentioned quite a bit today. And it's not just one thing that we're creating, it's an actual experience. So I want you to start thinking about that experience that you're creating with your customers, for your clients, and how that migrates from one to the next to the next to the next. If you take your iPod into your car, what is that experience like? I wanted to buy a BMW just because it had an integrated iPod system, just like the cup holder of the old days. You need to think about what people are needing and desiring, and how to take that process and expand it across all of your channels and networks and all the touch points that you have with your customers on a regular basis. So practical versus emotional, getting into the necessity versus desire. So how many of you guys have a cup of coffee in the morning? Automated machines, it's a habit, or as my friend Lee says, it's a ritual that you get into. Understanding what is addictive is very interesting. We've been actually doing a study recently on how people define addictive and how we can get brands and services to become addictive. Is that what companies want? Because if they're addictive, people are going to spend money on it, right? So one of the things that I've learned to do is tell my clients, it's not just getting to that addictive point, it's developing products and services and habits that become ritualized as part of your daily life. So we don't just have to get to that addiction. So in this particular case, this is a coffee machine that I have at my company. And I researched all these fancy machines that you tamp and grind coffee in 60 seconds or less. It's all automated, but you need an IT person to help. So what we opted for at our firm is an aesthetically pleasing, beautiful coffee maker, the red one. And the funny thing about it is if you look at the interface, or lack of it, there's not a single direction. You can't even tell how to use it. But because we loved this, and we loved the way it looked and the way it felt and the way it sat on the countertop and made a whole new look in our kitchen, we decided that we needed to learn how to use it. So you can't underestimate that power of motivation that comes from something that's desirable. So it's pretty interesting how that works. So practical versus emotional, this is another thing that we've been coaching our clients on, and as we get into more customer research and we start doing more usability testing and even some paper surveys from time to time just to get some more statistically significant information, we start defining what experiences our customers go through that are practical. What does that mean? And you have to think about your brand and what your brand embodies. A lot of people are trying to do both when they really aren't supposed to. Nike was mentioned earlier as one of the greatest brands in terms of sustainability. And also, obviously, Nike is a successful lifestyle brand. But one of the things that they have done so successfully is merge the practical and emotional experiences across all their channels of touch points of information, dealing with their customers in a way where they know what it is to be practical. At the same time, they know when to have an emotional impact and when to have a kick. So practical is convenient, it's learnable, it's all the things, time to task, make sure you get from point A to Z in the most efficient way possible. And that's as you get into that deeper layer after you get through your initial branding, you get into that interaction layer. That has to be efficient, practical, no nonsense, straightforward, simple, streamlined, and smart. And you can get there by thinking about your brand and interactions that people have. Are they practical or emotional? Don't try and put a flash animation in the middle of a sign-up form for someone that's trying to register their name and get a password ID. You need to understand when you have the practical experiences and when you have the emotional experiences, and what types testing and what types of UI to actually implement. So we've been on this thing lately about more than just usable. I've been talking about usability for nearly a decade or more, and started usability labs and hired cognitive psychologists and really tried to get people to understand the value and the beauty of one-on-one testing. And now we've taken a step further. We've gotten into that desire culture, and we need to think about, are people emotionally attached to it? What do they think about it? Are they going to share it with their friends when they get home after they have that experience? you know, you need to think about more than just usability. Does it integrate into your life? So the 2.0 bubble, just to think about, we talked a little bit about the past. Now let's think about the present. And I thought it was interesting because Malcolm said something that I was riveted to, and he said that for the first time, parents are mimicking their children. Did you think that was interesting? And it's very true. I had at one point, many years ago, when I was still on a 14.4 modem, my nephew came over, and he was about 7 or 8 years old, and he said, you know, I'm going to download this latest Nintendo game. And I said, sure, go ahead. And he went downstairs, and a couple hours later, he came upstairs, and the thing had crashed, and he had to restart the machine and re-log in, and he started that again. Now, this is 14.4, 28.8 modem. And he started downloading the Nintendo game again. An hour later, it crashed. Okay, so the same thing repeated. Now, if you were doing it, wouldn't you give up by then? Yeah, but because he was so riveted to this concept of downloading that game, 2 hours later, he had downloaded it, and he was playing it, and he was happy. So it's really interesting to see how the youth generation, and I'll get into that a little bit later when I talk about mobile, the mobile space, but how the youth generation is really driving a lot of usage and habits and behavior online and off, and making us understand things in an entirely different way. So this is a generic screen I saw and I pulled, and to be honest, I have no idea what this company is, only that they took every nuance that's supposedly 2.0, this friendly, bubbly look, the little shadow, interface, they have the nice type, and I realized that what 2.0 is an attempt to create interfaces that are so friendly that you just go, oh, that's cute, because they're trying to take the scariness out of machinery today. And so 2.0 is all about friendly, intuitive, easy to use, all the things that we start to get back to as we get back to our feelings of youth. So MySpace, this is another one. This is a shot that a friend of mine was sending around, and it's about sharing information, making us laugh. I thought this was a great shot. He said, I didn't do that. He actually did the one of the dogs. Those are his dogs, and these are some cat images that he found. But this sharing information, creating things that laugh, YouTube, we share information, we laugh, we're sharing experiences over time. So this is the MySpace phenomena, and everything that's happening is this new essence of sharing information, forming new ways of community and culture. There was an interesting study that came out that said in 1981 we had basically community, we had interactions with people, and 20 years later, and going into this era, actually people are sharing and communicating less than ever before. Now, they aren't just equating that to the internet, they're actually saying because commute times are longer, and because people aren't living in actual communities anymore, the face-to-face interaction that people have with neighbors and with other people in their community are really going away. But I think it's so sad in one way, and then it's exciting in a new way that we're learning to share and communicate in an entirely different way. Dodgeball is an example of something that came out at a conference that we have called South by Southwest, and pretty soon everyone was sharing information. It's like GPS located, and you can tell where your friends are, and you can SMS, and everyone can meet at one place. But what they didn't realize is sometimes you might be near a friend's house, and you don't actually want to call them. Not because you hate them or anything, or you may be hanging out with some other people and you didn't want that person invited. And so they didn't think about the nuances of that type of exchange, but the idea is solid, and people tried to use it, but it didn't quite stick, at least in my circle of friends. Another thing I've tried is Shozu, and Shozu is this fantastic application that you download to your mobile phone, take a picture, and in one touch it uploads to your Flickr or to your blog account, and it's really seamless and it works. And so you have one chance to try out these things, that we're being inundated in this new environment with so many products and services that we can basically give you one chance with your customer to make an impact, or they're going to go away forever. Plays is another one where you can locate yourself wirelessly. And I want to also talk about MVNOs just for a minute. MVNOs, you might be familiar with, different MVNOs are, like T-Mobile here launched in the States. One of them was ESPN Mobile and Disney, but they actually went down a few months ago. This is Helio, and Helio is trying out a new customized type of phone and interface that allows you to use MySpace on the phone, and they're using all the best practices from South Korea, and on and on and on, but is it sticking in America? So one of the things that we do at our organization is we take a look at trends and what's happening around the world and try and distinguish the success of SMS in one culture versus what might work in the United States. And we work with our clients to develop strategies for how they can start to integrate mobile and start to integrate different channels of reaching out to their customers in a strategic way over the next 12 to 24 months. The US market is growing, and it's slow, and we're behind, and I come to this culture. I'm going to visit Finland. I go around everywhere, but the US is happening, booming. Technology is riveting, but the US is slowly catching up. And one of the more exciting things about our market for your companies is because as you expand into the US, we're only 67 to 71% saturated right now in terms of mobile use and mobile costs and mobile devices. And so we have a whole room, a lot of room there for growth and for money. And another way to look at it is in South Korea and Japan, although those communities are hot and they're blossoming and they're just changing the way we think about the way we use products and services, they're over 100% saturated. So it's not necessarily a market that we're going to go into, but we can learn a lot from looking at those cultures. So design ethnography. Okay, it's called the new black, and I've finally become slightly embarrassed to use this term because I've been slammed a few times because I'm not an anthropologist or a PhD, and I don't have a background in social science. So what I've been saying lately, and carefully, is that I'm an evangelist for ethnography-based design and thinking and research. And the reason I say it's the new black is because this term ethnography has been coming out in every US magazine in the past 6 months to the year. And it's been so funny how I've been using this term for 4 or 5 years and, just kind of humbly throwing it around. No one knew what I was talking about. I thought it was kind of cool. And all of a sudden, ethnography is everywhere, the way Google is doing their work, the way Apple. And one of the interesting things is that this guy from 3Com said, and this is a quote, that they stopped, they wanted to listen carefully to what our customers didn't say and instead observe what they did and get to that aha moment. So ethnography has been touted as getting into a level of innovation for corporations and cultures, but we have to remember that, even as Hannah said, sometimes you have to think about solid first, what's happening in the next 1 to 2 years. And so you might have ethnographic research and follow people around and understand what they're thinking and what their desires are, but those might be sky level when you're actually needing to deal with what you have here and now. But I thought the way that she presented that material was so great because you can start to differentiate the way people are giving you feedback into what's possible now, what you need to plan for the next 1 to 2 years, what's pie in the sky and things that you should be thinking about in the future. So I really liked that whole thought process. And it gets into what I call this mobile or lifestyle-based user experience model, where the first level there is all about brand perception. You have a promise that you make with your customers. Remember, if you're emotional or if you're a practical brand, you need to hit them over the head and make sure that over and over again they understand and they perceive who you are. They have a certain trust level. My friend Tara explains brand as a contract that you have with your customers that is locked and repeated over and locked down because it's a positive experience that's repeated over and over again over time. So there's so many different definitions of brand, but you have that first layer, which is to catch their attention. And then you have the second layer, and it's really the interaction level, where you need to think a little bit more practically. You need to think, okay, here they're going to interact with our product or service, they're going to give it a shot, they're going to download it, they're going to sign up, they're going to try it, they're going to call someone at my company, and they're going to say, okay, we're ready for a demo. And you begin to go through that interaction experience and get into actual usability testing and trying to understand if this is working or not and what we have to fix. And in the end, you have integration or no integration. One of my clients had 18,000 people sign up for a free trial, and for 2 years they just said, we need to tap into that market. We have all these names of people that signed up, and I kept trying to explain they signed up and it didn't work for them. So they went ahead and they're ready to move on, but they didn't understand because they just saw it as a new way to market and to get to their new customers. And we actually worked with them, looking at their sales team, looking at their marketing team, looking at their lead generation team, looking at their web team, and we interviewed all of them, including the stakeholders, and we realized that they all had different goals in their organization. The lead generation team, of course, they're trying to generate 20,000 leads a quarter, right? The web team is just trying to keep up technology-wise with what they're doing. The sales team, do they want 20,000 leads per quarter? No, they just want the top leads for people that are really interested that they can follow up in. And so we came up with a strategy to help them redefine. They actually use the website to generate leads through that come up as A, B, or C, where the salespeople just follow up on the A leads and the rest are automated. And the salespeople actually called up the lead generation people and said, thank you. You've changed the way we've done our business, and sales went up. And it was amazing to actually look at an organization and see how every single person is working hard to do their jobs, but they're not thinking about the entire customer experience and the goals that those people have. And you really need to start to break it apart and make sure that your goals are aligned. At the beginning, I said I'd like for your corporate culture to change, and for the thinking to change, and for you to start putting your customer first, or continue to keep your customer at the forefront, and educate your company from the top down into how you can make that happen, and how you can integrate products and services into actual lifestyles. So, research. You know, now that you've bought into research, you say, Kelly, we believe you. We're going to go back and we're going to actually integrate this stuff into our workplaces. How do we start? And I drew this diagram. I have, a live, work, loft, which is fun sometimes, and sometimes it's a little bit weird not having a door to my office. But one of the things I realized is I have these big glass screens that I can pull over my bed and pull over my closet, and that's pretty much my living space. The bed folds up. Boom. And I started writing, and I can write on these, and they became giant whiteboards. And so I started really writing on them and thinking about what is research and how do we think about it? Where does usability fit in? Where does ethnographic-based research, not true ethnography, but this contextual type of research that we think is so important, what happens? And I asked an audience, how many of you wash your hands when you leave the bathroom? That's a focus group. That's what you think you might do in a situation. That's what you probably would do in a situation, but if you actually took a camera and put it in the bathroom, you'd see that 3 out of 4 washed their hands when they left the bathroom. 1 didn't think they had to. So it's kind of interesting. You were also slightly, motivated by those around you. Oh, don't want my neighbor to think I don't actually wash my hands when I leave the bathroom. So that's really a focus group. This is opinions. It's some good feedback. It's what people think they would do in a situation, but they might not actually do it. So we start getting into, what people think, and that's great, and surveys fit into that. And as I mentioned, at times we like to use different methods of information gathering, because I like to learn as much about my customers as I can. And I'm not a purist, and I get in trouble by the, usability community at times. They'll call me and say, Kelly is advocating the use of surveys, and we don't think that, and sometimes she does focus groups. And the thing is I'm going to get feedback any way I can, but I want to get past the what people think and into how people really live. And that's what I'm getting at. It's understanding through research, through contextual research, through usability testing, one-on-one interviews, how people are actually utilizing the products and services that you're creating into their daily lives. I asked a lot of my customers, how many of you actually get out there and meet with your customers? And no one raises their hand. I ask a group like this, how many out there actually get out and talk to your customers on a regular basis? So a few of you. And another take-home that I encourage, besides trying to change your corporate culture, is get out once per quarter and meet with your customers. At their workplace, in a cafe, whatever you do, it's going to change the way that you think about the products and services that you're creating, and it's also going to be fun change. So once per quarter, if you're a manager, get your team out there. Get them interacting with the customers. If you can do testing, that's fantastic, but I just want you to interface with your customer, find out what they're doing and why. It's really a great way to think. So we start getting past the who are you, demographic information. We still want to collect that if possible because you want to get into demographics, but we've really started segmenting in a different way. We kind of, user scenario, why are you coming to the site? And that's fine too, but what we're really trying to get out to is how does this fit into your daily life? So when we segment, we don't segment by males age 12 to 24 or males age 22 to 40. We segment according to their psychographic details, how many people, or you could even do it by new users versus people that come to your site regularly versus people that are going to be using your site periodically, or the interfaces that you use. And so we start to think about different ways of segmenting your audience so that you can target them in a more efficient and effective manner. So thinking about lifestyle design, this is a chart that I created after looking at agile processes and things that have come from engineers. And what I really try to do is understand that the goal is lifestyle-driven behavior. And sometimes you have the business needs and you have the technical constraints that come up. And so we go through this iteration and this cycle of iterating. This shows rounds of designs, rounds of feedback cycle, getting past the second round and the third round into this final goal, which is lifestyle-driven user experience. And the way that we've done that is by streamlining and consolidating our teams and having multiple types of individuals work together, from UI designers to engineers to researchers, much like what they're going to be talking about in the workshops tomorrow with Smart Design and with Continuum, is because we found out that we work in smaller, tighter groups, and we're working on faster cycles, and we've also been trying to educate our clients into doing this. It's really a better way of iterating and creating a positive user experience. One of our clients is from Japan, and they actually came to us, and we did 7 rounds of testing in 8 weeks. We did 7 prototypes in 8 weeks, and we proved to them that we could work currently with their team. Now, we asked them, why are you coming to the US? And they said, well, you know, Americans are the lowest common denominator. If you guys can use it, anyone can. And I thought, oh, that's great. You know, we don't read directions. We tend to try it, and if we don't like it, we can return it at any moment. So nonetheless, we helped them get through a pretty painful process. And a month ago, they launched a new product that we had helped design, a new printer line. And it was very exciting to see all the testing and research actually come to fruition after a year and a half. But we have to remember, again, thinking about Hannah's metaphor of solid versus liquid versus sky, and I hope she doesn't mind, but I'm probably going to keep using that. I will always attribute it to Sony Ericsson. But what's interesting is that people don't advance as quickly as we might think, especially in the US. It's very slow. If something works for an American, they're going to keep it, no matter how laborious or slow it is, because it's working for them. They don't really like to change. So we start thinking about mobile usage, for an example. We've been doing a lot of mobile research, and we think, okay, how can we get out of this US-centric thinking? So we start thinking about contextual inquiry and ways that we can actually start to integrate a plan where we, have a plan, identify our audience, observe them for a full day, have them do a photo diary, and then follow up. Now, this is not true ethnography, mind you. I'm being careful about how I use that term, but it's getting into the mindsets. And what we did was, just as a case study, we took a look at 3 different countries, and these are partners of ours, and we do a lot of research, quick-term research in Singapore and also in Finland. And we start thinking about, okay, who are these people, and how do they live their daily lives? And the interesting thing about it is, it's a baseline. It's just the starting point of companies being able to see that there really are differences between usage and behavior. Now, as I said, Americans are catching up. We're 67 to 71% saturated right now, so there's some hope there. But in the US, people just think of their phones like a cell phone. They still talk about rolling up and down their window even though it's electric, dialing a phone, these old metaphors that still come out. And in Finland, much like in Sweden, it's becoming more of a mobile device. You're multi-using it. It's not so dissimilar from things that are happening in the US and Europe at times. But in Singapore, as Tyler said, everything is completely different. In Asia, people are thinking of it as a true device. It's the new cool. It's the new cigarette. Kids are using it to exchange the way that they personalize themselves and call attention to themselves. They often have 2 devices. One is the cheap one is the cool one. And we have to remember that there's different people using things in different ways across different boundaries and cultures. And by doing these quick turn research, projects, we're really able to see that. So I'm almost out of time, or I'm actually running a little late. Sorry, but what I want to touch on really quick is the future. I have a few videos, but I'm not going to show them. I just want to talk about what the future is in this kind of sky thinking. It's really getting into information transfer in a new way, porting digital media as object-oriented pieces that don't just live on your computer, they don't just live on your cell phone, they don't just live in your GPS system. They live in a single element that's maybe, we're calling it micro formats in the US, and we're trying to establish rigorous methods of maintaining open standards while still tagging things so that you can use it in so many different ways. And this is a video. I'll just show you the very beginning of it, because this is kind of a new way that the Japanese culture is using their mobile phones to take videos in this booth, and then they can actually use a QR code, that little square code, take a picture of it with their camera, and immediately share videos with their friends. And so it's pretty amazing how that works. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of Second Life. Have you heard of the phenomenon? So when I joined 6 months ago, there was about 500,000 people. I looked yesterday, 1.3 million, spending about $500,000 every 24 hours. Millions of real dollars, not just Linden dollars. And so I've been, going on there every once in a while. Some of our clients are actually having us build virtual design spaces and office spaces and meeting spaces. We're going to have a conference in this world and lease out space. And So a friend of mine who, are you kicking me off? Okay.
It's like the Gong Show.
Okay, there you go. Oh my God. Anyway, if you look at my website, gotomobile.com, I just said yesterday they just launched the $100 laptop, which is a fantastic initiative. And I was just going to say that this is also part of the future, is making sure that cross cultures in every essence, from poor to rich, that everyone has access to information sharing.
Great.
And the goal.
Why don't we grab a seat? Because actually,
Okay.
I want to pick up on that point. And it was interesting your point about culture and how, and certainly in your homeland,
My homeland.
that the way Americans, still treat their phone as a phone.
Yep.
Is that a big challenge for companies? Because it's almost like a multi-lane highway that you have. And are your clients, and particularly ones that are perhaps in mobile telephony, are they working quite hard? And how do they do it to actually go about changing culture?
Well, it's nearly impossible, especially for the American audience. Americans are so stubborn, and they're generally not willing to make changes. That's where it's interesting to get into the youth culture, because the youth culture is the one area where they're seeing so much growth and revenue. And just as an example, in the US, kids aged 12 to 18 have about $5,000 a year of spending that they can do, which is amazing. They work at McDonald's, whatever, their parents give them money. And out of that, about 8 to 12% is spent on mobile as a whole. And in China, even though they have 20 times the amount of youth in that age bracket, in China, the spending average is $89 a year. And out of that, about 4% is spent on mobile.
I thought I was just going to say, I thought it was extraordinary. I'm not sure if anyone's seen the film Departed, but it's probably the first time in American film history that you've got a blockbuster where SMSing was part of the plot line. I mean, and it's extraordinary that it was only grasped by Hollywood at this point. I just want you to look into your crystal ball. You mentioned 3.0, and so many different journals and media outlets have different definitions. I'd just like you to maybe highlight 2 or 3 things when you think about 3.0 from a Goto Media perspective that we're going to be seeing, that's on the wave, that we're going to be hearing about.
Well, I'm actually going to quote Mark Fozzie. He actually put out a post in June of this year called The End of Google, and it reached 2 million people in 3 days. And what it was basically about is the semantic web, a thinking web, something that they predicted wouldn't be possible in 20 years, but because of the wiki and the ability for thousands of people to volunteer their time to create a thinking entity, he was predicting that the semantic web, the reality of that, could be possible in 3 years. And that it could take over the way we think about Google. And there was all these postings about Google's never going to die. But I think in 10 years we're going to look back and realize that it was just the beginning. And so the 3.0 evolution is what I've been talking about, is having machines that talk to us and become intelligent. Hopefully it doesn't go the way of HAL or Terminator, but it really is the future, and it's been predicted in Hollywood for years and years. They're not all that behind.
Okay, Kelly, we're going to have to leave it there. Ladies and gentlemen, if you give a great round of applause for Kelly Goto.
Thank you.
You can just stay there. We're going to take a little 2-minute break. DJ Sid Kid is back on the deck, so stretch your legs, ladies and gentlemen, run out to the bathroom very quickly, and we'll see you in 2 minutes.